This is Mr. Smith, and this is the video called Arrays Part 4. This is the last video in the arrays strategy for our Math Facts series. There will be other videos for other strategies. However, what this one is going to do, this video is going to take the first 3 videos, the knowledge that you've learned in those and the skills that you've learned in those videos, and put them all together in a way that you can mentally do a lot of this math instead of actually drawing out all those dots for the arrays as it is. So this one helps you figure out math facts that you don't know by taking what you do know about arrays. And so these are some of the things that you do know already, is that you can break an array into 2 arrays. That it makes it a little bit easier if you make one of them with a column of 5. And today you're going to continue to see that the rows are going to stay the same. And then what you're going to find out here is that the columns get broken down into a 5 and what we call the leftover. So let's take a look specifically at what that means. So I'm going to break one array into 2 arrays. I'm going to make them with one array having 5 columns. So these are our rules that we're going to follow. So instead of actually drawing out my 3 by 7, I already know that 3 is going to be the same for my new array, my 2 new arrays. Remember, we're going to make 2 new arrays, and that I'm going to make one of the columns a 5. So one of them is going to be a 3 by 5. And now I simply have to figure out, okay, well 7, and if I have 5 that I've taken away from the 7, how many are the leftover? Well, that would be 2, because 7 minus 5 is 2. So another way to write 3 by 7 is to write 3 by 5 and 3 by 2. Now I'm going to do that for some other ones, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to actually solve these problems. 4 by 8, let's break this one down. I can break 4 by 8 down into 4 by 5, and what would be the leftover? 8 minus 5 is going to be 3. So 4 by 3. Again, remember, the rows stay the same, which is the 4. Okay, the rows stay the same, that's the 6. So this is going to be 6 by 5, because that's going to be the first one. And what's going to be the leftover? 6 by, well, 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay, again, using those same strategies, that same strategy thinking, 6. And we're going to have 5 for the columns. 6 by 5. What's the leftover? 6. Has to be the rows. And of course, 9 minus 5 is 4. So that's how we would be able to break down that particular one. Now, going to our last one here, we have 4 by 9. 4 is the rows. We're going to keep that the same. We're going to have 5 for our column in our first array. And so what's going to be our leftover? 4 by what? 4 by 4, because 9 minus 5 happens to be 4. Now, we're not done. This was the important part of our learning, and we know now that you can break arrays down into 2 arrays. So this original array of 3 by 7 is now 3 by 5 and 3 by 2. But now we need to finish the deal. We need to actually figure out what 3 times 7 is. If you recall, in my one of the first videos that I created, we know, or we found out way back then, that 3 times 7 equals 21. But let's say that's what you're stuck on. You don't know that, and that's why we're doing this. We're using these arrays to break down these arrays into smaller ones. And now I can do 3 times 5, because 3 times 5 is 15. I know that one. And I know that 3 times 2 is 6. And so now what I'm going to do finally is I'm going to take that 15 and I'm going to add to it the 6 from the other array. So when I put the 2 arrays together, I get 21. So yeah, that is how we are going to use arrays, breaking arrays down in order to figure out what a math fact is. So the math fact happens to be 4 times 8. I can break that down into 4 times 5, and we know that 4 times 5 equals 20. And 4 times 3. 4 times 3 equals 12. And now what I do, using those knowledge of those previous facts of 4 times 5 and 4 times 3, I can take 20 and I can add to that 12, and I would get 32. And that's what 4 times 8 equals, is 32. Let's try this one. The original fact is 6 times 7. What does 6 times 7 equal? That's often one that people get messed up. So break it down. Break it down into 6 times 5, which equals 30, and 6 times 2, which equals 12. Now I can add those. 30 plus 12 equals 42. And that's what 6 times 7 equals, is 42. Let's do this one. Okay, what does 6 times 9 equal? Again, this is one that people often can't figure out, or they don't know it. So I'm going to break it down into 6 times 5 and 6 times 4. 6 times 5 happens to be 30, and 6 times 4 happens to be 24. And you should be able to actually mentally add some of these together. And if you're able to mentally add these, you would know that this is going to be 54. If you're not ready for that step yet to mentally do it in your head, you can certainly write it down still. Do the column method and add that all up. And you're going to find out that, again, you're going to get 54. All right? One more. 4 times 9 that we broke down. We don't know what 4 times 9 is, so we do know that 4 times 5, because we can break 4 times 9 down into 4 times 5 and 4 times 4. We're going to get 20, and we're going to get 16. And again, if I add these mentally, I know that that's going to be 36. If you need to write it down in the column method, that's just fine too, as long as you're understanding that strategy, that 4 times 9 equals 36. Now, let's do one from scratch. Let's do a 3 times 8. So you're trying to figure out what 3 times 8 equals. And so what you want to do is you want to break this down, first of all, to 3 times 5, right? And what's the leftover? Whoops. What's the leftover going to be? Well, I'm going to keep the 3, because that's the number of rows in an array. And what's 8 minus 5? That's 3. So 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 3 happens to be 9. And so now 15 plus 9, you should know that that's 24. And again, if you need to use that column method, you certainly can. So 3 times 8 is 24. One last one. Let's do 3 times 6. Let's break it down. 3 times 6. What is that going to equal as a math fact? Let's say you don't know it. Well, I'm going to break it down into 3 times 5, because we're using 5 for our columns, which equals 15. And 3 times 1, because 6 minus 5 happens to be 1. So I did that a little bit out of order there, but it's still going to get you there. 3 times 1 is 3, and that of course is going to be 18. This concludes this video tutorial on how to use arrays, how to break down math facts, essentially is what you're doing using 5s. So maybe we're going to call this the breakdown to 5, is what this would be, using arrays and using your knowledge of them in order to figure out math facts.